I cringed and reached for my ear, pulling back just before my fingers brushed the bandage. An orderly watched me, one hand on his radio. If I clawed, they'd restrain me again. But I hadn't lost my mind entirely yet. Maybe. But I would if I couldn't move. I pushed back from the table and went to peer out the window. The bars blocked most of the view, but I could see the grass and trees, the wind ruffling the leaves.
Just one more. It's so easy. One more for us.
I gripped the bars for balance. How long had it been whispering to me, my purloined treasure? Years? Months? No. A week. That was it. A week. And the last 36 hours or so had been right here, in the gentle care of the Rowan Institute for the Mentally Disturbed. The first 12-ish of those had been under sedation and restraint. The restraints did their job. The sedation hadn't. Even in the dark blur of too many psychotropic drugs, I could hear it. That voice, snarling with rage and making far too much sense. It made me want to rip my ear off, but there's not much hope of that when strapped down. For a moment, staring out at the pristine lawn, I ached to go back out in the world. I ached to go back a week, just 1 week, to before this happened. An orderly carefully stepped up and cleared his throat. It was the one who had been watching me. His hand was no longer on his radio. It was on his taser. The whispering stopped, and the chatter in the room intensified. The orderly, Jeff according to his name tag, led me slowly and carefully down a series of halls until we reached a door labeled Dr. Lovely. Seriously? He knocked, then opened the door and not quite shoved me through. The doctor behind the desk smiled in that carefully professional way. He stood, motioning to a chair. "Please, Miss Wallace, have a seat." He picked up a pen, and we went through the standard background bullshit, searching for a reason I may have lost my mind so suddenly. No, I wasn't abused or molested. Yes, I still had both parents. Yes, I had 2 perfectly normal siblings, and on and on. All the while the voice, I refused to give it a name, snarled and growled in my ear. It was rough listening to 2 things talking at once. Every time I hesitated, the good doctor made a note.
Oh, for fuck's sakes, just stab that pen through his eye and be done with it.
I blinked hard, then asked for a cup of water. We don't do glass at the Rowan. We're dangerous here. I played with my safe plastic cup as Dr. L leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Tell me what happened at the grocery store." Well, that was abrupt. At some point during my teenage years, I had picked up a love of shopping. The target didn't really matter. Going out, wandering along aisles, stroking potential purchases, it all warmed a cold spot in my heart and made me feel better. I didn't even have to buy anything. Just being around carefully placed products offered satisfaction. Grocery shopping was a particular joy. Bright lights and straight shelves. Was it only a day ago? A day and a half?
Let's do it again. Bash his head in, and we can get out.
The whispering was giddy with potential. I could feel the doctor watching me, but the office faded away, and I was back in the store, considering pasta. At that point, the voices had only been in my dreams, nightmares, visions of horrifying violence. I woke up every morning exhausted and more than a little twitchy. In the true spirit of irony, I'd actually been considering therapy. I wasn't enjoying shopping as much as I usually did. I was tired and jumpy, and the lights seemed overly bright. But the shelves were in perfect array, and there was comfort in that. Right up until the man at my left picked up a jar of spaghetti sauce. He looked it over, read the back, then shrugged and placed it back on the shelf. In the wrong place. I heard the growl in my ear, deep enough that I knew it wasn't from any outside source. But it wasn't my voice either.
Kill the bastard.
I tried to stop. I swear I did. The man laughed when I told him to put things back where he found them, and my temper snapped. My mind snapped. As he turned away, still laughing, I grabbed the jar and smashed the back of his head with it. I had to jump up since he was a good foot taller. The jar shattered. I hissed, pulling a piece of glass out of my palm. He'd stumbled forward, cursing and grabbing at his head. It wasn't enough. The voice laughed, laden with gravel.
Cheap brand. Grab the can instead. Good, solid, reliable brand.
I had a can of tomato sauce in my hand before the whispering stopped. The man was still bent over, swaying slightly. I jumped on his back and brought the can down on his head over and over. He fell and I rode him to the floor. There was a howling, screeching sound. Later I would learn it came from me. At the time, all I heard was the breaking of a skull and the squish of the can going through blood and brain. The can had broken as the skull caved in, the scent of tomato mixing with the smell of gore. My mouth watered. Someone pulled me off him, and many someones held me down. The screeching went on, the laughter in my ear drowning it all out. I woke up at the Rowan, cleaned, drugged, and strapped down. "Ms. Wallace?" The doctor was talking to me, but he seemed far away. The whispering was getting louder, and it was making more sense.
Shush. We'll get out of here. And oh, the fun we'll have.
An hour ago, I wanted to claw the voice out of my head, rip my ear off, carve it out. Now, I took comfort from it. I remembered the feeling of the can, cracking and cutting my hand. I remembered the high. I reached up to the bandage. "Where's my earring?" Dr. L nodded as if he'd been expecting me to eventually come around to that subject. "Tell me about the earring." "Where is it?" "It's safe with the rest of your possessions." "Why is it so important?" The man was a moron.
Grab his pen. Right through his eye.
I need it. The doctor nodded and made a note. "Tell you what, you explain the significance, and I'll see about getting it for you. Deal?" The significance. How could I explain that? I found it in an antique shop. It was the kind of place that was both fascinating and uncomfortable, with clutter threatening to fall off of every shelf. Treasures leaned on each other like drunks seeking balances, and cabinets sagged under the weight of the history they bore. The place smelled of dust and old books, ancient silk, and dry wood. Shannon kept pointing out pieces of interest, holding up statues lingering over typewriters older than the building. She still had half her ice cream cone, so she was limited to hand-waving and small objects. We'd been giggling all afternoon, and we weren't stopping anytime soon. At the back of the shop, after we squeezed past fainting couches and Asian cabinets, I heard it. Not yet a voice, not even a whisper. It was nothing more than the hint of a presence, a temptation. While Shannon flipped through a stack of crumbling magazines, I took a small jewelry box off a shelf. Inside was a single earring, nestled in rotting velvet. The silver was tarnished and looked almost sticky with age. The stones, though, were as perfect as possible. They looked as if they'd just been polished, or were unaffected by time. Lapis lazuli, 3 of them dangling in a filigree. I was enchanted, and I couldn't stop staring. I'd never seen such perfection. I didn't care that there was only 1, because 2 would have been overkill. 1 was exactly right. "What you got over there?" Shannon had scooched her way to me. I snapped the lid shut and held it up to her. "Just a jewelry box. Pretty, isn't it?" We thanked the old man behind the counter on our way out. Shannon looked back. I'm not sure he was awake. I slipped my hands into my pockets and stopped walking. My left hand wrapped around the earring. A shiver danced over my skin. I didn't remember taking it. I sure as hell wasn't returning it. Shannon paused before we got too far from the shop. "That jewelry box. I kind of liked it." She knew. She'd seen the earring. She wanted it for herself. I smiled. "You should get it then. It's definitely a one of a kind." We went back into the shop. The owner snored gently. "Ms. Wallace, the earring, please. Why is it so important?" He scribbled another note as my lips curled into the memory of a grin. "Because it is mine. It was meant to be mine. It belongs to me." A week ago I had driven a gaudy metal statue into my best friend's heart as she picked up a useless jewelry box. A week ago I had stuffed her body into one of those Asian cabinets and covered the blood with a tattered rug. A week ago the owner was still snoring when I left, alone. As the door chimed my exit, I'd wondered how long it would take anyone to find her. Dr. L set down his notebook and pen. "I think we need to discuss this more before we consider returning it. Let me call an orderly to take you back to your room." Rage washed through me. The voice was relentlessly chanting now, and I'd given up on ignoring it. Later, I'd surely go back to clawing and begging, but for now it was a perfect symphony. I jumped onto the desk, grabbing the pen. Before the good doctor could scream, the pen was through his eye as deeply as it would go, and he was twitching his way to death. They moved me that afternoon, in full restraints, complete with padlocks. They'd tried drugging me, but nothing seemed to work. The Thorazine did cause a beautiful haze for a while, though. My newly assigned guards looked horrified when I whispered, "Oh, that's lovely." I'd been giggling since. Shannon would be proud. She loved a good pun. My new home had more bars on the much smaller windows. The orderlies still had tasers, but they also had armed guards. The Center for the Criminally Insane, a rather dull name, didn't fuck around. Apparently, I was dangerous. I'd never see the earring again. I knew that. But the whispering was constant company now. I wouldn't need the pretty gemstones. I had everything I needed within me.